Outlast surely contains one of the scariest stories ever created. You find yourself trapped in an asylum with the only light source being a night vision camcorder. You need to gather enough evidence to be able to sink an organization on the appearance of being nice. This place is full of monsters with a dark past, but which you must face while being plunged into darkness. But otherwise, Outlast offers a very exciting and heartbreaking story, which I will detail for you in this video. Story begins with the DLC called Whistleblower. Outlast takes place in September 2013 in the United States. You first play Waylon Park, a computer engineer who has been working in the Mount Massive Asylum for several weeks in Colorado on behalf of an officially charitable organization under the name Murkoff Corporation. Except that today, Waylon writes an email to an independent journalist in the hope of exposing to the world what he sees in this asylum, since he has been working, committed by Murkoff on their patients. While sending the mail, he is interrupted by one of the members of the organization to go to the room where the malfunctioning morphogenic engine is located. It is this device that is the heart of the problem in Outlast. Obviously, for the moment, we know nothing about its functioning and its purpose, apart from the fact that the subjects are pushed by an inhuman protocol to be compatible with this device, which plunges them into a lucid dream state. While Waylon is trying to get it to work properly, a patient named Gluskin, who managed to escape from his cell, begs him for help before he gets overpowered. This is too much for Waylon. When he returns to his computer to finalize the email, he is captured by Murkoff's vice president in the name of J.M.I. Blair. He understood very well that he was trying to expose their actions, given that the network is extremely monitored. He doesn't know it, but the email has already been sent. To get rid of him, Blair condemns Waylon to participate in the famous program to become compatible with the morphogenic engine. He simply filed a false declaration in Waylon's name which affirms his own desire to participate in this program so as not to arouse possible media suspicions. He even took the trouble to contact his wife to tell her that her husband is in great need of treatment, which will be graciously offered to him by Murkoff. Just hours into his therapy, an incident occurs, the result of Murkoff's years of experimentation aimed at controlling this ghostly-looking thing that is massively attacking the facility and making no distinction between patients and the staff. The unrest creates a loophole in the system which allows Waylon to escape. He takes this night vision camcorder with him in the hope of filming useful things to definitively incriminate Murkoff. It is one of the main mechanics of the game. This camcorder will allow him to sometimes find his way in total darkness. The lens is obviously to leave the establishment, but the task turns out to be more complex than expected. These patients, transformed into these things called variants, kill all the staff who once tortured them. Their violence is limitless. During his escape, he hears two members talking about a radio that would be in the prison, and he starts looking for this radio in the hope of warning the authorities. There are two main antagonists in this DLC. The first of them is a cannibalistic variant which chases him. His real name is Frank Minera. He was a subject for Murkoff's project, but he was basically very unstable. He has lost a lot of weight since his admission because he was only interested in consuming human meat that Murkoff did not provide him with. I'll let you imagine his desires now that he is free. He managed to lock Waylon in an oven, but he managed to escape thanks to a construction defect. He will encounter him several times, and he will always want to devour Waylon, but he will never achieve his goals. Despite the hostility of the places where he meets many creatures, which will be detailed later with the first opus, Waylon ends up finding the famous radio, once again before he uses it. Blair intervenes to keep him away from radio and Breeze to make sure no one finds out. Blair flees after hearing an even more monstrous creature approach. He knows it, and he is counting on it to eliminate Waylon. This creature is the most physically powerful variant, and it will appear quite a few times in the first opus. For now, you just have to escape from him. It is during this hunt that Waylon meets probably the most twisted antagonist of this DLC, Eddie Gluskin, otherwise called the Groom. He was the one who fled earlier. Remember when Waylon was trying to repair the engine? Eddie is a variant who wishes to make his future wife from scratch, but from the body of a man. He targets Waylon, but despite a desperate attempt to escape from him, he manages to get his hands on him and the gas to take him to his workshop. 12 hours later, Waylon wakes up. He watches, completely helpless, the torture that Eddie inflicts on other men to remove their private parts, their welds, as he says, to make the woman. These men all end up bleeding to death. Obviously, that he's about to do the same to Waylon. In fact, he was unbalanced even before becoming a variant, hence why his admission to this asylum. He was a misogynist and serial killer who mutilated women. This deviant behavior to be explained by the traumas of his childhood. He was physically attacked many times by his father and his uncle. They even filmed all the scenes. The only memory he keeps of that is just the pain. He was too young to understand what they were doing to him. Today, his only desire is to create the perfect family. In short, otherwise, Waylon managed to escape thanks to the intervention of another variant, and throws himself through the window of the establishment to reach the outside courtyard, even if it means breaking his leg. To continue moving forward, Waylon managed to get his hands on a key that was in the chapel of the psychopath who still pursues him. In fact, that's where he gets married and even managed to get his hands on him to put an end to it this time. And he is deeply hurt because Waylon refused his love and to share this life of pure happiness. While he tries to hang him from a peak on the ceiling, we see all the men who were victims of this psychopath. Waylon, however, manages to reverse the situation thanks to his weight, which is greater. He ends up ironically projecting Eddie on his peaks. Here, he is now at rest with all the men in his life.
We could have been beautiful.
To respect the chronology of Outlast, it is now time to talk about the first opus, which takes place at exactly the same time. This time we play Miles Asfar, the famous independent journalist who was contacted by Waylon to inform him of the horrible things currently happening in the asylum. Miles goes there, and here is the content of the email. Terrible things happening there. I don't understand it. I don't believe half the things I saw. Doctors talking about dream therapy going too deep, finding something that had been waiting for them in the mountain. People are being hurt, and Murkoff is making money. This need to be exposed. Miles is interested in what is happening because the Murkoff Corporation has been hiding its activities for a long time, always behind charitable works, but until now never on American territory. In the same way that Waylon is also equipped with his camcorder to film everything. Before he even enters the asylum, a variant has already spotted him before hiding. Murkoff's armored forces are also already there. Once inside, Miles discovers the horrors committed by the variants on scientists and even military forces. A still alive officer advises him to leave the premises immediately. To do this, he must unlock the main door from the control room. A nearby document talks about a patient named Billy who is said to be the host of the morphogenic engine. He is currently in a lucid dream state, which is Murkoff's very goal. The result is unprecedented. Shortly after, Miles is attacked by the monstrous creature seen previously. It was the patient, Chris Walker, a traumatized ex-military. Miles loses consciousness after his fall, and he finds Father Martin at his side. He presents himself as a father and prophet. He considers that Miles is an apostle sent by his God to help him spread salvation. He leaves him alone to the moment. Miles continues to look for a way out despite Walker's repeated attacks. He was a soldier and he mutilated himself to the point of tearing off parts of his face because of his anxiety, and that right after his admission, like any good soldier. He loves order and respect for the rules, and that is why he kills variants and personnel since the recent unrest. As Miles attempts to open the main door from the control room, Father Martin cuts the power and plunges the asylum into darkness. While he tries to restore the power, a document explains to us the past of this asylum even before Murkoff's intervention. In the 1950s, a secret program called MKUltra, developed by the CIA, took place here. His goal was to control and program the mind, the worst part of it all, and that it is inspired by our reality. The research focused on hypnosis techniques on the patients of this asylum with the aim of modifying their behavior without their knowledge. For example, they made a patient commit homicide when she had a phobia of firearms. After her act, the patient did not remember anything. The program grew to develop drugs to treat this condition, but following a public scandal, the asylum had to close in the 1970s. It was not until 2009 that Murkoff reopened it under the guise of charity. They resumed his work to achieve the Walrider project. This is the ghostly creature we saw at the beginning. Once the power is restored, Father Martin succeeds in drugging Miles to calm him down because he must witness his work. He shows him a surveillance video where the Walrider gets rid of the guards with disconcerting ease. Father Martin is convinced that the Walrider is God. He is in the process of fulfilling his truth. The Father adores this entity, which, contrary to what it seems to be, has nothing supernatural. Miles later wakes up in a cell where he was placed by Father Martin. A note written by Miles lets us understand that this whole place revolves around one man, Dr. Wernick, yet he is supposed to have been dead for years already. Fortunately for him, a disrupted variant takes him out of his cell. Father Martin has quite a few followers in this asylum, like the Naked Twins, who will be encountered a little further on. The two have been ordered not to harm Miles for now, but they calmly discuss who will eat what once the restriction is removed. They quickly lose patience and start tracking him throughout the asylum until Miles finally thinks about escaping from them. He is guided by a completely healthy voice which tells him that he must use the plate lift if he wants to survive. Having no other choice, he listens to her. But once on the upper floor, a variant who thinks he is a doctor awaits him. He's the self-proclaimed Dr. Trager. It was he who had trapped him. He ties him up and leads him to his workshop. Documents let us understand that he worked for Murkoff initially, since we can see that he had a professional email in his name. He worked in the biological division before being infected by this disease. Unlike the others, he is able to maintain a calm and coherent conversation, but he remains fascinated by the collection of human limbs. He will even end up tearing off two of Miles' fingers. Once gone to add Miles' fingers to his collection, Miles takes the opportunity to escape from his workshop. Trager chases him and we see that he is holding other variants hostage. A moment later, Miles locks himself in an elevator. Trager throws himself at him with his tool to put an end to it, but he ends up getting crushed between two floors. Miles had started the elevator. A little further on, the journalist finds Father Martin, who was outside, and the priest asks him to meet him outside because he is close to his goal. He only has to follow the traces of blood to be guided to him. Miles accepts in the hope of escaping all of this. The Father is the only variant that seems harmless. When he crosses the outer courtyard in total darkness, he encounters the Walrider for the first time thanks to his camcorder. He begins to track him and the other variants throughout the installation until he comes to drop his camcorder. It is obviously impossible to leave it because it contains all the evidence, and Miles goes to the lower floors to retrieve it. The Father continues to give him instructions to join him to the female ward. The place is infested with variants like the twins still unleashed, but he manages to recover his now cracked camcorder. In a nearby relaxation room, we can hear a recording from the 80s between the famous Dr. Wernick and the interviewer. The interviewer, who is an American, asked him why the Americans did not succeed in reproducing Dr. Wernick's experiments aimed at controlling the mind when they had applied his protocol to the letter in the 1940s. Wernick gave him the reason. He, who is German, as well as his subjects, who are also German, experienced a devastating fear because of the context of war. After all, it was the Nazi period. He explained to him that in order for the experiment is successful, it is imperative that the subjects experience a sufficient degree of horror. This is the obligatory condition if we want to carry out the Walrider project. Recording stops after that. All of this explains why the asylum patients were driven to the point of madness and their behavior today. In general, these patients were not criminals. Once Miles managed to reach the chapel where Father Martin was waiting for him so that he could witness his sacrifice and thus become a sort of breast. According to his note, he is convinced that this God that he believes to be the Walrider exists. He has thought for a long time that a higher vocation concerns him, and this is what caused his admission to the asylum. Since he heard talk about the Walrider, he considered this thing as the God in question, and he is ready to do anything to respond to his gospel. The Father is just a variant like the others. In any case, before taking his last breath, he informs Miles that he has repaired the elevator so that he can finally leave to spread salvation. Now that he has seen this miracle, he had to see the elevator does not take him outside at all, but into the Murkoff research base. This is exactly where we were in the DLC. Documents at first explain to us all the experiments that were carried out here for the Walrider project, but above all, this entity is just a swarm of nanite, millions of nanoscopic machines, which is an extremely small scale and invisible to the eye naked. The whole point for Murkoff is to control this swarm of machines. For that, you need the famous morphogenic engine, which is nothing other than a math formula, just an algorithm, and above all, a host. During his progression, Chris Walker ends up catching Miles, but the Walrider shows himself once again, the extent of the power of several million nanomachins assembled together and all acting in a coordinated way to develop a phenomenal strike power. Let's imagine what damage such a weapon could do in a conflict context. You therefore understand the aim of Murkoff's research. Chris Walker ends up in pieces in a few seconds. Miles manages to escape him once again. In a room, he finds Dr. Wernick, the famous German doctor behind this whole project, and who is supposed to have been dead for years. He actually worked for Murkoff for some time. He was passed off as dead so he could return to his job. From the 1940s in Germany, Wernick was a Nazi. Today, he admits it was abuse of wanting to control a swarm of several million highly evolved machines, all controlled by a mentally tortured host placed in a lucid dream state. The current host is one Billy Hope. He asks us to cut off the power to the machines that keep Billy alive to stop everything. It's the only solution. While Miles tries to deactivate these famous machines, we can also see Billy locked in one of them. He is violently attacked by the Walrider to protect his host. But despite everything, Miles managed to deactivate everything. This will end this nightmare. At least that's what he thinks. Billy is just supposed to be dead for now. Although very weakened, Miles finally arrives at the exit of this facility with all the evidence in his camcorder, ready to bring down the organization. Except that when he leaves, he is greeted by the Murkoff guard, accompanied by Dr. Wernick. He has warned them of this intruder and definitely does not want to stop his work. The guards open fire to eliminate him and all his evidence. However, in the last scene in black screen, we can hear that Miles himself has become the new host of the Walrider. This remains the big question to this day. Is Miles alive? We will just see his Walrider-shaped silhouette again later. As we have seen, the first condition for becoming a host is to experience a state of extreme panic. With everything he has seen here, we can say that he ticks this box. Moreover, according to a document which covers studies on the Walrider, we can read that the host develops cellular regeneration capacities. And thanks to that, we can assume that Miles is still alive. But beyond this rational side, it seems that there is also a supernatural dimension. The doctor says in the 80s interview that this state opens a portal and is a sort of gateway. It's quite ambiguous. By that I think he is still alive, not physically as we knew him, but in Walrider form. And we are going to see it in the DLC. Let's pick it up where we left off. Remember Waylon, who is still in the asylum after fleeing the psychopath who wanted to make him his wife. On his way out, he witnesses the fire in the chapel after Father Martin's death, later finding the tactical forces analyzing Trager's body and obviously eliminating any incriminating evidence. Despite everything, he finally manages to approach the exit. The last obstacle is once again Blair, Murkoff's vice president, who wounds him almost mortally to extinguish the threat he represents. After having let down his guard by offering him a deal, except that the irony is that the Walrider executes Blair before he finishes his act to definitively eliminate him. The Walrider mysteriously spares Waylon. The latter finally leaves the installation and heads towards a car that you probably recognized, that of Miles from the beginning of the game. As he starts the car, he sees from a distance the silhouette of Miles in the shape of a Walrider. It is well, he who became the new host. Waylon finally leaves this hell after that. Sometime after his recovery, Waylon is about to divulge everything he saw at the asylum on the internet, but a man who is a former Murkoff test subject warns him anyway. He warns him that his act will be irreversible and will have serious consequences. Certainly the evidence is incriminating, but Murkoff will not let him go. After that, he and his whole family will surely be hunted down. Waylon ignores his warning anyway and posts the videos. This is how this first opus ends, as well as its DLC. But there is a 6-issue comic that connects the first and second Outlast. But what interests us most is the future of Miles and the Walrider. And here is what we learn. The comic revolves around the story of two Murkoff agents, Pauline Glick and Paul Marion. Obviously, they are not there to save lives or help people, but they are there to ensure that Murkoff's covert operations do not cost the company anything. In other words, they have their backs. The third issue is the one that interests us the most. Both discuss the events at Mount Massive Asylum and state that Miles has been officially neutralized, at least according to Murkoff. They subsequently launched false information and conspiracy theories under Wayland's name, all with the aim of decrediting him to the public. It works perfectly, and his evidence collected during his stay in the asylum will not at all have the expected impact. After that, Wayland burned down his house before fleeing the area with his wife and 2 sons to protect his family. Finally, several appearances of the Walrider in the guise of Miles will be seen outside the asylum, which means that his influence can extend everywhere. A neighbor will even say that he saw Miles at his house. Very strange. We will never see him again, just like Wayland. Murkoff will continue. This is the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If so, don't hesitate to subscribe and like, because I took a lot of time to make this video. The time to find the information, and in addition the time to do the editing, took me a lot of time. Goodbye and thanks for watching.